Hi and welcome. This is Homebody Rundown and I'm HR, and this is week 5 of a 6-week pantry challenge. The idea of the challenge, at least in our house, is to just focus on using items that we already have in the pantry, the refrigerators, and the freezers, and not buying a lot of new stuff and using that first. So we are getting through some items pretty well at this point and starting to run out of certain things, but for the most part, it's just been really nice to see what I have, take an inventory, and especially get through items that are getting close or past their expiration dates. I am still buying items during this pantry challenge. I decided to keep buying produce and dairy and eggs. For the most part, that's it. And I will share in the video or in the description what I buy and how much I spend. But for the most part, I am spending way less than normal. But having sometimes, especially the produce on hand, really makes it less aversive to go through some of these pantry items. It just adds a lot to the recipes. Right now, I am only cooking for 3 of us in the house, and that means we have lots of leftovers. And I am not showing you every meal that we are eating or all the food I'm making, but for the most part, it is the majority of what we have in the week. But I'm not showing like really simple things or snacks, anything like that. Also, we tend to eat a mostly vegetarian diet, but in a lot of these meals, it would be easy to replace non-meat items with a meat item. Also, this is not a recipe channel. I do not share measurements. I am not always even mentioning all the ingredients. I try to show all of them at least. But if there is an inspiration recipe, I will link it in the description. But just, I want to be clear that if you follow a recipe I link, it will not be what I made because I never follow recipes. Well, almost never. I'm starting off here with a mushroom stroganoff. In this pan I have olive oil and butter along with frozen diced onions and frozen mushrooms. These put off a lot of steam and it does take a little longer to cook these down because you just have to evaporate off so much moisture from this. But you can see here they're looking pretty good. The I guess base flavor or strong flavor in this is coming from bouillon cubes and, well, just 1 bouillon cube. I also add Worcestershire sauce, which is not vegetarian, the one I use. It does have anchovies in it. And I have this mushroom umami seasoning that I am able to get at Whole Foods, and I really like that. I added in flour in order to make a roux and thicken this up for a gravy. Other flavors included thyme, roasted garlic, black pepper, and garlic powder. I had pre-cooked the egg noodles, and these are frozen green peas. Once those have warmed through, I'm adding in low-fat Greek yogurt and Parmesan cheese just to taste, and then usually we add a little more just on each serving. Here's how it's looking. It's really nice to have the frozen mushrooms. I know they're not for everybody. I mean, I have made this with fresh mushrooms and it tastes better, a lot better, but I mean, it just has a lot of, flavor from fresh mushrooms rather than frozen, but this is a good alternative and it's nice if you can't get fresh mushrooms. Personally, I prefer them because then I don't have to process the mushrooms, which takes a lot of effort. Next up are snickerdoodles. This is a staple cookie in our household. Everybody likes these. And into this mixer I have sugar, shortening, butter, and eggs. Got that mixed through, and then I'm going to add in the dry ingredients. And I did replace 1 cup of the all-purpose flour with 1 cup of whole wheat flour. And I'll start the mixer on slow and get this mixed through. It's really a pretty simple dough. I will link the recipe. I think for the most part I am following the exact recipe out of the Betty Crocker cookbook that I have. It's an old Betty Crocker cookbook, but I just replaced, like I said, the flour. Here's how the dough looks. It's pretty soft, and this one you don't have to refrigerate before you bake it. I am rolling the dough into a cinnamon sugar mix, which I may have gone a little heavy on the cinnamon on this one, but the cookies I scooped with, I believe it was a 1 ounce scoop. And here's how they look. They baked really nicely. They're still soft in the middle. And I will end up putting probably about half of these into the freezer. And I've had really good luck with just pulling these out of the freezer and defrosting them. And they're still great texture and great flavor. And these are completely cooled down. You can just see how they look on the inside. And I do bake these on air bakes with parchment paper. So I don't really have a problem with cookies burning unless I leave them in way too long. But yeah, these were delicious. Now here I have pinto beans that I soaked overnight in a brine, and I got those rinsed really well into the Instant Pot, and I cook those. And these, you can see some of them are starting to fall apart, and that's fine because I pretty much use all of these for refried beans, although today I'm going to use a few to just make a quick lunch. Out of the freezer, I got my very last bag of Stacy's tortillas. These are some I order from Azure Standard, and also part of a chocolate cake that I made, says back in December, which I have great luck with, cake still tasting great even after it's been in the freezer. Here's what I bought for groceries this week. I have lettuce, cabbage, cilantro, and green onions. For lunch, I also had defrosted Spanish rice that I made a couple weeks ago, maybe, or a week ago. I got the cilantro cleaned up. Here are the spices I'm going to use. I have chipotle, roasted cumin, ancho chili, roasted garlic. And into this pan, I have diced green pepper, and I did have some fresh onions, so I used that. Getting in avocado oil and spices, and it does include salt. To go along with this, I'm making a quick guacamole. This is 1 avocado. I like to add lime juice, garlic powder, and salt. And this is just to taste. So I will sometimes also add in my mix of garlic powder, onion powder, and black pepper. Just getting this mixed through, and gave it a taste. It needed more lime juice and a little more salt. But the avocado was in really perfect condition, so that was a nice surprise. Into another pan, I have some of those pinto beans. For the most part, they are drained. There's not much liquid in here. Adding in spices. This is salt and roasted garlic, some of the cilantro, and I did have avocado oil in the pan, lime juice. Now back to the pepper onion mix, I added in frozen corn. And then I had completely forgotten to add or to get out smoked paprika, so I added that to both of the pans. I'm a big fan of that flavor. I did not use all of that Spanish rice that I defrosted, but I added in part of it here. And, just with a lot of rice that I defrost, I like to add in extra liquid of some kind. And here I had fire roasted tomatoes in the refrigerator that were left over, and I added in, I don't know, maybe 1/4 cup of that, and then a lot of cilantro. This turned out excellent. The beans were delicious, but the rice was wonderful. By just adding in those extra flavors, the extra fat, and the fire roasted tomatoes with the fresh cilantro, it was just, okay, I just listed everything. But anyway, it was really good, and the guacamole was great with this, and I did add a little bit of Greek yogurt as well. With the filling that we had left over from lunch, I was able to make up a few burritos. I did have to get out some of the refried beans to add enough into these, but I also added in shredded sharp cheddar cheese as well. I roasted pecans, and I do not know why I do this all the time, but I set the oven temperature too high, so they got a little dark, but it's okay. They are salvageable. I like to have these in my oatmeal in the morning, and I also put them on to yogurt, and I use the food processor to chop them really small. This is just what I prefer, and I do keep these in the refrigerator. On this day, I am making garlic knots to go along with a soup, and I am mixing up this dough in the KitchenAid with a dough hook. I have the dry ingredients in there, just mixing those around, and into this 4-cup measuring cup, I have melted butter and garlic. So the recipe I have, I'll link the book that it's in. It's not available online, but you are supposed to, cook garlic in butter to make the garlic butter. And I just had roasted garlic that I defrosted from the freezer. So I'm just kind of winging it with this, adding in the water, and then slowly adding this mixture into the bowl. I am very grateful that I have a mixer that can do this kneading work for me. I have some joint issues, so I really, really appreciate this. Now, when a recipe calls for, sometimes after you run it through the mixer, you're supposed to also spend a few minutes doing some hand kneading. I skip that. I never do that step. But here you can see the dough. It's all incorporated, and it's fairly sticky. And I am just getting this sprayed with oil and getting it into the oven. My oven has a proof setting, so I will put it in there for a while. And I think you're supposed to wrap this probably tightly in saran wrap, but I don't like saran wrap, so I just use a towel with a plate over it, and it rose just fine. It helps that it's in a warmer place. It's a little sticky. And you'll see here, I am wearing gloves. This is not a food safety issue. This is just a very dry, cracking skin issue. So especially in winter, there are times when I wear gloves just so I can avoid another hand wash, just because my skin is not in great shape. And I'm not good at this. I've only made these, I don't know, 2 times before. So kind of making them into little, they're supposed to be garlic knots. Mine ended up being more garlic wreaths, and it's okay. It's fine. Yeah. So I don't think they should have the space in the middle like a donut. They're supposed to be more compact, but after they proofed again, they definitely filled in for the most part. You can see here, they're looking all right. Here is where I did something very different than the recipe. You are supposed to have this garlic butter that you made reserved to spread on top. I did not have that, so I thought about just doing butter, but then I'm like, well, I ended up adding in a little garlic powder, and I knew there was a chance it might burn, and it definitely got dark, but thankfully it did not burn. But next time I would just do butter. It would be fine. These have been in the oven for 4 or 5 minutes, and then you pull them out and add on the butter and put them back in the oven. So while that's baking, I'm getting started on the soup. This is going to be a spinach potato soup. I have frozen spinach and frozen hash browns and frozen onions, which I wanted to get through some of these items. The potatoes and onions I've had for a while. And I really don't like things in the freezer too long. They may still have a date on them that says they're good, but I just find things tend to start getting freezer burn, and then I have to throw it out. So into this pan I have oil, spinach, onions. I cook those down, and I've been trying to use up some vegetarian broth powder, and I use that along with bouillon cubes and that mushroom umami seasoning I have. I remembered that I had a little bit of pre-cooked vegan hot Italian sausage in the refrigerator, so I added that in as well. The base is mostly water, but I'm adding in some milk too. Here are how the garlic knots turned out. So you can see here they got a little dark on top. My oven runs hot. I think I need to get in the habit of just not setting my oven temp quite as high as what the recipe says. And so you can see the garlic powder got a little dark, but it did not taste burned. And you can see here, these baked really well. It's a good recipe. The dough, or the bread, is very soft, and these are delicious. And they're also good to dip into the soup. You see here, that's just a very fluffy dough. I definitely do not replace any of the all-purpose flour with whole wheat flour. This is all-purpose. To thicken up a potato soup, I like to use instant potatoes, but I did not realize I was out of the ones that I ordered from in bulk from Azure Standard. But I found this bag. It was expired, but it seemed okay, and I'm not serving this to other people. And I went ahead and added some of that into this soup. You could also just thicken it with, cornstarch, or you could make a roux at the beginning and thicken it that way. But I always prefer instant potatoes because it just gives you more of that potato flavor. Here's how the soup is looking, and I make this different every time. I don't always add spinach. Sometimes I've added kale. It just depends on what I want to use up or what sounds good. This is sharp cheddar cheese, and I do end up adding more here. It was just stuck in this jar because I had to store it in jars. I had run out of Tupperware. I've been really wanting to get more of the glass base snapware, Pyrex snapware, but I can't find it anywhere. Anyway, here is the soup. It was delicious, really good, and I think I did end up adding a little more Parmesan on top once this cooled down. And it's really good the next day too. Had a few veggies in the refrigerator that had been in there a long while, so I went ahead and roasted them. That was broccoli, and then this is baby carrots. And I am going to make a faux chicken pot pie, and use some of those roasted I'm using all of these roasted baby carrots. But to make this vegetarian, I am using a vegan chicken product. Using up more of that vegetarian broth powder I'm trying to get through. I also have poultry seasoning, roasted garlic, my spice blend, nutritional yeast, and bouillon cubes. This is olive oil. I really like to use this enameled cast iron pan. This is avocado oil. And because it can go from the stovetop right into the oven. Getting the seasonings in while the fake chicken is cooking. And once this is defrosted enough, I do use the meat chopper to break it down, but it wasn't quite defrosted enough at this point. Also, I have the heat turned down, and I do not have a lot of loose oil when I do this because you have to be careful with that meat chopper. If it slips, it could splatter oil. Adding in flour. I also added in frozen onions and let those cook. Then I got the flour in there, mixed that around to make a roux with water. Sometimes I use a mixture of milk and water, but I only used water on this night. And I just keep adding it slowly until it seems a pretty good consistency. I had a few of the diced frozen potatoes left, so I used the last of those in here. I have frozen green peas, and then the roasted carrots I chopped, also adding in frozen corn. And slowly mixing this. The sides of this pan are not really high. Put in a little nutritional yeast, and I decided I wanted it to be a little thicker. I sprinkled in a little more flour. And then here is how the filling is looking at this point. And just so you know, when I'm cooking, I am always tasting. So once it's safe to do so, if there's raw flour in here, I wouldn't taste it until it's cooked for a few minutes. But I taste it, and I keep adjusting the seasonings. I don't always show every seasoning adjustment that I do. I defrosted this pie crust. It is a 365 brand from Whole Foods, and it's just a little larger than this pan. So I rolled over the edges, and I put some olive oil on the top and sprinkled some salt just to give it a little more flavor. While that's baking in the oven, I am going to use up, I had 3 kind of random tomato products in the refrigerator, and I did not want them to go bad, so I'm going to cook those. In this pan, I have frozen onions, olive oil, and roasted garlic powder. Once the onions have cooked down a little bit, I got in all of those tomato products, which was pizza sauce, tomato paste, and fire roasted tomatoes. And I am going to let this cook down quite a bit and thicken up, and then I can use this as a pizza sauce. You know, it's nice to have a really flavorful sauce, especially if I'm just making little individual pizzas, like the pre-bought naan breads that I get at Costco. Here's the pot pie, and having the pre-made crust makes this super simple. It would be better with a homemade crust that has more butter in it for the flavor, but this was really easy and very filling. Here's how it looked. And I mean, I know a lot of people would prefer a pot pie that has a crust on the bottom as well, but I only do one on the top. Here's the sauce after it cooked down, and you can see it's really thickened up and it had great flavor. So I'll get this cooled down and in the refrigerator. And I just thought I'd show you that having the pot pie was very nice on this very cold day. Like a lot of the United States, it has been especially cold for our area, and we've been getting quite a bit of snow as well. I'm going to mix up some of the spice mix that I use quite a bit. I use this onion powder. It's Happy Belly brand. I ordered off of Amazon, and I like that it's a product of the USA. I just like it when things say where they're from. I like that accountability. The granulated garlic is from Costco, and it is also grown in the USA. And then the black pepper is a product of Vietnam, and it's also from Costco. And I just do about 1/3. This is just my preference for cooking, and 1/3 of each. I put it in a little jar and mix it up, and then I have this little pour spout lid. Now, I am used to this kind of a pour spout lid, so for the most part, I don't, over season things or have it dump out really fast. It would not be for everybody, and I think it's probably not as convenient for the kids when they're cooking because they're not used to it, and it would be really easy to dump out too much, but I find it more efficient. So I got that all mixed through, and I just really enjoy having this on the counter so I don't have to get out all 3 of those containers. I just really felt like a ramen type soup, and I had this white miso paste in the pantry. I have a recipe that's really good for ramen, but you have to have white miso and red miso, I believe, and I can't find that at any of the stores I shop at. I would probably need to go to a specialty store, and I decided to just wing it. I'm just making this one up. This is some of that white miso paste in a pan with avocado oil and tofu that I have tried to get out as much of the moisture as possible before I put it in the pan. And then I just crumbled it up. I added some sambal oelek, and that was toasted garlic powder. I was trying to get the last bit of the ginger out of this tube. Did not have any luck. This was a new one. I tend to stock up on those when they go on sale. I'm able to buy that ginger at Whole Foods. I had roasted garlic and shredded cabbage. I had already chopped this up. I was hoping to make fish tacos, but I never got around to it. So I already had the green onions prepped and the cabbage, so that was really convenient. This is a little oyster sauce, and well, it's not oyster sauce. It's like oyster flavored, I don't know. It's not the real oyster sauce. And anyway, getting in the water now so that it will have a broth, and then I have these really wonderful little ramen noodles, and I break them up into bite-sized pieces. Here's how it's looking so far. They only take a few minutes to cook, and I was tasting it and I decided I wanted it to have more of a peanut flavor, so I added in peanut butter, and I chopped up roasted peanuts to add on top, along with some sriracha. This was really good. It really hit the spot. Now, as it cools, if there's leftovers the next day, it is going to thicken up quite a bit. Those are wheat noodles, so they tend to absorb a lot of moisture. A really easy lunch today. I defrosted vegan hot Italian sausages. I sliced up the very last, well, they were already sliced up green peppers for hummus, but I didn't want them to go bad, so I sliced them even thinner along with a red onion. I did not realize I had 2 red onions left, so got that sliced up as well. So after the sausages were done, I got the peppers and onions into the same pan, and there was avocado oil in this pan with the sausages, and got those fried up, added a little bit of salt and the spice blend that I mixed up earlier. And luckily I had a few hot dog buns in the freezer and was able to defrost those as well. Put a little pickle relish or dill relish and mustard on this. That was really good. Another item I bought this week was a whole milk yogurt. I wanted to make a lemon poppy seed muffin, and the recipes I saw called for whole milk yogurt or whole Greek yogurt, and I bought vanilla on accident. So I had a cake recipe that used vanilla yogurt, and I decided to go for that instead this week. I'm going to try to make those lemon poppy seed muffins next week. But anyway, I'm using, well, I kind of am using a King Arthur tender white cake recipe. I will link it, but I modified it heavily, so what you get if you follow the recipe won't match what I got. First of all, I used the whole egg, not just egg whites. And because it was vanilla yogurt, I hesitated to add extra vanilla because I really wanted a vanilla flavor in this cake, and I should have tasted that yogurt because the vanilla flavor was very weak or very mild. I was shocked. I expected it to be a lot stronger. I don't think I've ever had this brand of vanilla yogurt before. So anyway, I had decided to do, instead of all butter and oil, and then I'd forgotten the oil, so I had to mix that in at the end. As everything's mixing in the KitchenAid, I always review the ingredients, and that's usually where I realize I've missed something. But anyway, I got this into a really large baking dish. This is a 10 by 15, not a 9 by 13. And here's how it looked after it came out of the oven. It did bake a little longer, I think, than the recipe calls for. And I'm going to make a chocolate frosting to put onto this. I don't do a really thick frosting, but in this dish I have butter and shortening. I had warmed up the butter in the microwave and then added the shortening just to melt that a bit. And as I was getting the ingredients in here, I realized I needed a bigger bowl. So I switched it over to this dish. I have the chocolate powder in here, a little bit of salt, just a sprinkling of salt. Got in the powdered sugar, and then a little bit of milk, and my husband was around, so he came in, mixed this for me, and here's how it's looking. This was really good, and I'm glad I put a frosting on this cake because the cake did not have much flavor. It baked well, the texture was really good. It was sweet, but other than that, it just doesn't have a lot of flavor, and I'm not sure the best way to get a stronger vanilla flavor. When you make a chocolate cake, you can add espresso powder, something like that, and it makes it more chocolatey or vanilla. But I don't know, to make a strong vanilla cake, I would assume you just need to add a lot more vanilla flavoring. But overall, I was happy with the moisture level on the cake. I like a more dense cake, so this was not a really fluffy cake, but it wasn't dry. It turned out really well. It baked really evenly, so I think I'll just keep modifying what I came up with. And then I'm going to freeze part of that as well. Really happy with a lot of the foods that we made this week. Used up a lot of pantry staples, which was good, and also a lot of freezer items. I think my favorite was the beans and rice. There was a ton of flavor in that. Also, the garlic knots were delicious with the potato soup, and the snickerdoodles were fantastic as always. Looking forward to making a couple new things next week, and as always, thank you so much for watching.